Hi everyone, thank you very much for joining us on this episode of Startup Talks. We are joined today by Umair Shahzad. Umair is the leads product at GrocerApp. Um, it, Products are very important. The development of a product, the management, and taking the product forward is very important for startups because startups are usually working in spaces or trying to solve problems that haven't really been done before. They might have been done in other markets, but this uh, in a particular market where the startup is starting off. In that market, the idea may be new or there may be some competition. So, um, product development and management in that regard plays a very important role. If there is nobody to pay for your product, if it is not solving a particular problem, or if the user experience of that product is not up to the mark, so it can actually take the startup down the drain. So we're going to explore all of that with Umair. Assalamu alaikum, Umair. How are you doing, my friend?
Ji walaikum salam. I'm doing very well. How about you?
Great. Thank you very much for joining us over here. Umair, uh, before we dive into what product management and development is all about, let's talk about you first for just a bit. I was looking at your profile. You've been with Hoodie Ventures. You're with GrocerApp now, right? You've been involved with some startups at the NIC as well, right? You've been helping out people. You've had a close look at the startup ecosystem, how it is developing. So, what's your overall perception of the ecosystem and how is product management evolving within it?
Right. Thank you so much for having me on the Startup Talks, firstly. Really appreciate it. And yeah, so talking about startups in particular, the space looks fairly exciting, especially the last year, more than raised. So the market is hot. People are sort of now taking that leap and have that confidence to try and have their own startup of their own. So the market overall has sort of enabled people to try and take that leap. Talking about that, in the past 3 4 years, I've sort of worked with startups per se. My career sort of started with a very conventional position in a few companies ranging from textile to oil marketing. And back in 2017, I sort of figured out I might want to join the tech space. I worked with a few startups based out of NIC. Sort of wanted to understand how are things working in the startup ecosystem. I worked with them for about 6 to 8 months, trying to understand how does things work at fairly early stage startups. So trying to understand broadly what do startups do, what happens in the tech space, what do engineers do, how does business development mostly vary from very conventional businesses to what happens in startups. And that's when I realized that's what I really like to do. And then I sort of landed a position at Hoodie Ventures, which is a venture studio of sorts, where I was one of the first few hirings for the business team. I worked there for about 2.5 years, building startups from scratch, making sure I sit down with the engineers, try and understand the business before the product was built. And once that was built, you try and launch it from a fairly very MVP-ish product, and then trying to develop product on the side, and then also making sure it scales. You acquire a lot of users. Then the next goal is to try and make sure you scale it. So product management from its core in the early days of my career was mostly trying to build products for early stage or fairly very early stage startups, and trying to make sure that from day zero you are building the right thing for the right people. So I built multiple products, I launched them, I went through the whole journey there at Khudi Ventures, and that's when I took the leap for GrocerApp as well. So my mostly experience for Khudi Ventures was in and around building technology products or startups at very early stages. But then I moved very recently to GrocerApp, which is an e-commerce platform delivering groceries. So now I am looking after product management here at GrocerApp as well. So broadly trying to answer your question, the overall product management in technology startups has sort of now been understood, and people now really take that importance fairly very easily, because early in the day, being a product manager, people sort of may not have realized how important it is to have a manager at your team. Mostly those were tasks that were being done by mostly co-founders, CEOs, early executives, and then you sort of have that product manager come in to give you that push and give you that sort of direction to where to take your product, or other important departments as well.
Sure, sure. Acha, Umair, I've also worked with lots of startups, been mentoring quite a few for many years now. You've also been working with them, but I'm sure you must have also come across this, uh, because this is not the first time uh, in the world that people are starting business, any business, right? Anybody who ventures into entrepreneurship, right? uh, चाहे वो रेडी वाला छोले क्यों ना बेच रहा हो, राइट, वो उसके लिए एक स्टार्टअप ही है. And this is not this is a phenomena that has been going on since we've had civilization. People have been starting businesses, some die out, some carry on, right?
Yep.
Even big corporates that we hear of today, or big tech companies, they also started off from something very small and then grew into what they are today, right? So uh, over here in Pakistan, since startups usually grow on, or the dimensions of it are a bit structured, right, to the context of having an MVP, or having a product development team, or having a product management team, or having a growth hacking team, right? Those sorts of things are actually a new phenomena for Pakistan to be hearing all those terms over here. Uh, so, for the audience, what would you say how to differentiate between product management, its development, and what is an MVP? Uh, the concept of A/B testing, right? How do you think, so that everybody understands, how do you think they are either differentiated or integrated between each other?
Yeah. So you've touched upon multiple points. I'd like to take them one at a time.
Yeah.
It's fairly interesting. In terms of tech space,
Yeah.
when we say a term as startup, स्टार्टअप पाकिस्तान के अंदर जब मोस्टली लोग बोलते हैं तो हमारे जहन में आ जाता है कि कोई एक टेक्नोलॉजी स्टार्टअप है या तो उबर या करीम है.
Mhm.
If you're just technology startups, yeah, startups that are enabled through tech, it's sort of become imperative that we will be having an application of sorts. Yeah, हमारे पास multiple ecosystem होगा of multiple apps, जिसके अंदर आपके vendor apps हैं,
Mhm.
आपके पास customer facing apps, and then maybe even a website per se. So product manager का essentially role varies from startup to startup. Firstly, Number two, what stage you are at. Is it just day zero? Is it just that you have scaled to multiple cities?
Mm-hmm.
So role of a product manager may vary कि अगर आप ने अभी launch भी नहीं किया है and you're just building a product. तो उसके अंदर it will be more about product development rather than product management, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it also varies from industry to industry. Are you currently in a grocery space? Are you currently working as a SaaS platform?
Mm-hmm.
So that also varies. Because जिस इंडस्ट्री में आप होंगे उसकी ऊपर डिपेंडेंट है मॉडल क्या है. सो ब्रॉडली टचिंग अबाउट प्रोडक्ट मैनेजमेंट वर्सेस प्रोडक्ट डेवलपमेंट, ये मोस्टली डिपेंडेंट होता है कि आप किस स्टेज के ऊपर हैं. सो मोस्टली स्टेज है you will be doing more of product development, जिसमें mostly your first goal will be to build that minimum viable product,
Mm-hmm.
which basically means only for the audience कि आपने ऐसा सबसे आसान प्रोडक्ट क्या बना सकते हैं for you to quickly launch, because early stage startups में what's more important is to try and test your product within the hands of the user. तो आपका आप सबसे आसान प्रोडक्ट क्या बना सकते हैं. So building product is more important rather than managing because essentially you've not launched, right?
Mm-hmm.
तो उसके अंदर है कि you try and understand your consumer perspective. You try and understand who your users are and what do they want, and then try and map it with the engineers that you have, your front end, back end engineers, your maybe a UX guy as well,
Mm-hmm.
and try and make it as simpler as possible to launch. So uske andar it's more about product development.
Mm-hmm.
If you are a company that's scaled to multiple cities, you have validated your MVP. You understand that built was the best for the customer, and now you need to try and tweak it. You need to have multiple flows in place. You need to solve other problems rather than just acquiring customers.
Mm-hmm.
That's when product management steps in, and you need to solve for multiple problems at a time. You have multiple categories of problems ranging from maybe category teams in an e-commerce platform to finance teams to
Mm-hmm.
customer service to retention. That's sort of what doing those A/B tests that you mentioned. So everything that you do as a product manager sort of enables your product. So any A/B test that you do, any growth hack that you do, is just giving you much more data to try and understand what you are trying to do and how's that test been enabling you to try and build a better product every day.
Mm-hmm. Salib, this was uh, actually good to give an overall perspective. All right. What we'll do is we'll dive into uh, each individual aspect of this last comment, right, so that people understand it in depth. So to begin with, because there's a lot of influx of technology in new businesses that are popping up every day, right? Attracting
Right.
loads of investments as well. So, uh, with regards to technology startups, what's the nexus between product manager and those technology startups? Say, for example, we'll take two use cases, maybe the e-commerce space that you're involved in right now, right? Or maybe the ed tech space, let's suppose.
Right, a very interesting question. So basically, product manager, like I mentioned before, vary करता है on the stage. So if you were to an ed platform versus are at a very fairly similar stage, have very similar monthly active users. Uh, in an e-commerce platform, I most certainly believe it will be more of an operationally driven business as compared to maybe an ed tech platform. So I'm assuming someone who's working at an ed tech platform might be working more towards just an application or a consumer facing application and maybe just a dashboard. So
Mhm.
here uske top problems will be very different from that of an e-commerce platform. E-commerce platform would be trying to solve for operational problems ranging from customer delivery to the right sort of payments coming in. How do you solve for cash on delivery issues? How do you try and solve for maybe poor customer experience?
Mhm.
So a lot of offline experience may be coming into e-commerce as well.
Mhm.
But and maybe an edtech platform would be much more different as to that of an e-commerce platform. Even per se, in terms of edtech, your users are much more different in terms of what do they want on an application. So totally varies who your customers are, and then how do you try and solve for problems that are particular to that particular industry norm. An expectation of a student on an application would differ from that of a person who's coming to buy a grocery.
Mhm.
It totally depends on who your customers are.
Okay. Interestingly, um, I believe user experience also plays a big part in developing a product, right, and how it is managed. You obviously must have come across, this is a huge issue for the banking industry right now, right? Everybody is trying to all conventional banks or traditional banks, that is, they are trying to digitize their operations, launching apps, and I'm not going to take names here, but this is actually a very big issue. So in your opinion, w- what's the how would you describe the relationship between the user experience and product development?
Yeah, so I think both of them go really hand in hand, right? So you can't have a great product if you don't have a good customer experience, right? So I think customer experience or user experience comes first, and then comes product management. Product management has multiple layers. You have customer experience or user experience. You have then an offline experience. So essentially, product management has multiple layers, but one of them being customer experience, which is sort of the core. Talking about banks, I most certainly believe is one vertical or one area in Pakistan where a lot of work is being done on not only the offline experience but the online experience of multiple applications
Mhm.
of different banks. So trying to make sure really in terms of good customer experience or user experience, you need to lay out the expectations of the user and try and basically understand the pain point. So it basically eventually boils down to what your user wants. So basically trying to create a good customer experience through mapping the customer journey. Once you have that journey mapped down, you try and understand what the user wants at every stage of that customer journey, and then trying to create convenience as you go. So
Mhm.
so mapping down customer journeys, trying to solve for customer problems, apart from just not creating a fancy application, but trying to solve for real problems that user faces, not only offline but online as well. Maybe just transferring of payments. How do you try and create convenience at every stage of the application cycle is the key for having a great product. If you try and understand user experience from that of a customer, I'm sure you would be able to build a really good product.
Janet, building on from that, right, that was pretty in depth because user experience, like you yourself rightly said, it plays a very important role. Right, even if we take, for example, these talks as well, right, if there's no value being created from
Mm,
it, right, then it's pointless for the two of us to be sitting here and having this conversation, right? So it's
yeah.
user experience as well is all about creating that value. Now,
Yeah.
mm, now, Umair, startups are uh, they have an acute problem where they don't have money, right? Even if they get funding, they still don't have money. Right. So for them to start small, right, from one table to building it into hundreds and hundreds of people, right, it's a very exciting journey. And whoever gets on that train, right, actually is at the end of the day, in a couple of years, actually becomes a very happy person, right? And this the career progression for people in startups is absolutely phenomenal, right? Having with people start with having no experience and eventually going on to building their own startups, like we are seeing with people coming out of Kareem and Uber and building all these new businesses. So, what would you say that for an early stage startup, right? Uh, wh- uh, for carrying on from that and towards growth, what's the importance of the product manager, or how does product management and development, because it all goes hand in hand and carries on developing as the business grows. So what's the importance of it at an early stage? Because a lot of people who actually start off, a lot of founders, right? If I'm starting a business, I might think, okay, fine, I know this is my baby, I know everything about it, and all that, right? And I try and do everything by myself. And most of the time, it actually comes out to be the main reason why a business fails, right? So, what would you say? What's the importance of a product manager at that time?
Right. I think you very rightly mentioned that a lot of startups they most certainly did not build the right product, right? So from day zero to day 100, I think it's really important that you talk to the right people, right? So you may be building a really fancy application that works day in, day out,
Mhm,
does absolutely what you wanted it to do,
mhm,
but maybe it's not the right thing what your users wanted, right? So trying to really dig down deep into what my user wants or what my customer segment wants, and then building the right sort of
mhm,
technology on top of that is the key. In the initial stages, it's not really important that a product manager comes in.
mhm,
If you, as a co-founder, really think that you have it in you and you can build the right sort of platform, collaborating with the engineers, it's fairly awesome to do that to try and solve for large problems that are not just towards product development, but also for product management as well. So it's imperative to say that product management sort of sets the tone for your overall vision or mission that you're trying to achieve as a startup, and that's basically linked to how you try and grow. So your overall growth is not dependent on your on what you are building or how you are building. So
mhm,
it's basically build through growth. To try and simplify this, because most startups are tech enabled and you want to acquire users or have those users on the right platform, it's really important that you build the right platform, and that's where product managers or product management teams come in, and then they try and give the overall vision to the product. So be it early stage, be it growth stage, product manager's role sort of evolves with that of the company, with that of the startup that you're trying to build.
mhm,
So it really sets the tone for the startup, where you are going, how much users you are requiring, how do you try and retain users. Uh, 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 it's really important for product managers to set the tone for the startup, sit down with the executives, with the CEOs, with the COOs, and trying to really understand what the overall goal is for the startup, and then maybe try and break it down into multiple chunks, into quarterly goals, into biannual goals, and then really solve problems per se. That's where a product manager comes in and says, that's one structure that we need to build as to how and what to build as a startup. So at that point in time, you don't have a lot of stakeholders involved. You're fairly a very small team,
Mhm.
maybe five, six people sitting down in a room and trying to solve problems that are not being currently faced as a startup. And that's mainly because you have not launched. Or maybe once you have started scaling or you're scaled, that's when real users data comes in and you try and understand uh, not only problems that the customer is facing, but even problems that you might be going to face in the very near future, because that's when your core product goes into testing, right? It comes into the hands of the users, and you try and solve for problems, and that's where the product management really sort of evolves, because you have then multiple teams ranging from finance teams to category teams, for example, in an e-commerce platform. Then you have marketing teams, you have operations team, depending on what sort of startup you're looking at, and then all of those levers of each startup trying to have their sort of feature.
Chale, Umair, it was very insightful speaking to you. I hope people have some learning to take from this conversation. Before we finish this off, there are lots of opportunities being created, even in the product management and development space. So, for people who are looking to get on that ladder, what message would you have for them?
I personally think product management or product being a product manager is a really exciting space to be in, especially when it comes to technology or tech-enabled startups, because that's one space that gives you that liberty to try and collaborate with multiple stakeholders. You go top of the ladder, you go bottom of the ladder as well, and then you go horizontally from finance teams to marketing teams to business development to operations, to really try and solve for real problems. And that's where the real learnings come at. You are one day sitting down with engineers trying to solve for an API related issue, and then the next day you are in a warehouse trying to uh, teach a particular ops guy how to use that product. So it varies, and then that's where the real learning comes from. So I most certainly believe product management is a really exciting space to be in.
Mhm. Chale, that's wonderful. Chale, Omer, thank you very much for giving time over here on Startup Talks. It was great talking to you. Hopefully, if you're in Karachi sometime or I'm in Lahore, I'd love to meet up for a chat.
Definitely.
Right? Thank you very much for this, for doing this.
Thank you very much to you too.
Best of luck.
It was a pleasure connecting. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Allah Hafiz.
Nafis.